What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with Brendon Kleen of Locked On Suns as Chris Paul is set to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks with a fractured thumb. What is going to happen with the Phoenix Suns over this final one-third stretch of the season? Does this ruin their consistency, their ability to coalesce just before the most important point in the season heading into the playoffs? What is this team going to look like? How much pressure is on Devin Booker and the Suns to keep competing at a high level? But first, quick message from our friends over at Built Bar, because when it comes to protein bars, if you haven't checked out Built Bar, you've got to check them out. They are the best protein bar on the market. So many amazing flavors to choose from: raspberry, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie, mint chocolate. I can go on and on about all the different flavors available with Built Bar. Every single bar is covered in delicious 100% chocolate. They're not gritty or chalky like other protein bars. They're delicious, soft, easy to chew. They're basically candy bars that are jam-packed with protein. Every bar is low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Amazing if you're on a keto diet. Amazing if you're trying to cut back a little bit, lose a little bit of weight. You can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Joining us now to talk about the Phoenix Suns sitting comfortably atop the entire NBA at 49-12, a team that doesn't necessarily feel like it's getting the respect that it deserves at this point, is Brendon Kleen of Locked On Suns. You can follow at Brendon Kleen 14 on Twitter. Brendon, we're going to get into the fact that the Suns, first off, it doesn't feel like they're getting the respect that they deserve, at least in my opinion. And I want to get your thoughts on that as far as being like a favorite, a contender this season. But the Chris Paul news, we found out just before All-Star break, Chris Paul, the thumb fracture, going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. And even on the low end of that timetable, first off, is he going to be back in time for the beginning of the playoffs is my first question. And then secondly, how big of a blow is this to the Suns? I know that they've bought themselves a little bit of like breathing room in the standings. There's probably not a significant worry that they're going to like suddenly just, tumble all the way down the standings. But that said, how big of a blow is this to the Phoenix Suns and just their continuity going into the playoffs this year?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of laugh when you said comfortably at the top of the standings. I don't know if it's comfortably right now. The Suns are coming off 2 straight losses now, which has been a rarity for them this year. As much of a I guess first world NBA problem as that might sound like, it's with the opponents considered as well, the Pelicans and the Jazz. I think you're seeing how much it could impact them if he's not available. I mean, they frankly got pretty lucky to win at the level and be as effective as they were in the postseason last year when Paul was either out or hampered. I don't think that's normal. I don't think any team should expect to do that when their best player is out. They also are dealing with Cameron Payne, his backup, also being out, so that doesn't help either. But yeah, they're not as organized. Guys aren't getting as good of shots as they are used to outside, in the role player mix. They're not generating as many threes as normal. The crunch time offense, like all the things that you would expect when you remove, a generational talent at point guard. But from a standings perspective, I totally agree with you. I don't think they are really in jeopardy of losing out on the 1 seed. We were recording right after Golden State just lost a game, and they have not had their stuff together with Draymond Green out. So I think Suns fans aren't panicking yet, but these 2 losses are putting it front and center, just how bad it can get if you're not at tip-top shape with everything else.
You mentioned Cam Payne. I'm glad you brought him up. What exactly is the timetable on his return, and when can the Suns expect to have him back in the rotation?
So he's an interesting case. I mean, he was supposed to be back on Thursday, the first game after the All-Star break of Thursday of last week, and he missed that expectation. That was just reported. That was never something the team put out there concretely. It appears that he's nearing his return. The Suns have 2 days off to start this week. Payne has been before games doing sort of a full warm-up, using the hand that he sprained his right wrist. So he's been back to using that hand, doing full shot motion, everything. So you would think maybe with those 2 days, he finally does make his return. I would imagine he slots right into that starting point guard spot, and he's sorely needed. I think you also asked me if Chris Paul might miss playoff games. And to answer that question and his timeline too, I think it's an open question. I mean, his thumb, it's a thumb fracture. So it's basically the bone where the ligament that his thumb that moves his thumb around connects to the rest of the hand. And that all gets pretty complicated, especially with the mobility you need on your thumb. It's on his shooting hand. So they said 6 to 8 weeks. 6 weeks would be basically right when the regular season ends, / a week or so afterward. 8 weeks, obviously a lot longer than that. And you're really starting to talk about some first round games that are missed. So everybody obviously in Phoenix is hoping both of those timelines are on the short end.
Chris Paul is just never allowed to have, a regular season. I think the only one you can look at is his one-off stint with the OKC Thunder, where, his very first vegan year. And I think part of the reason that he, found a modicum of health that season was just purely out of spite, because James Harden had him jettisoned up to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and he was just so, fueled off of wanting to prove him wrong and prove everybody wrong, that he wasn't washed, that he still had plenty of life and longevity left in his career, that he was able to, have a really successful season with no health complications. But again, Chris Paul going to be missing some significant time. Cam Payne will absolutely be the guy to kind of steady the troops a little bit in that point guard role. But Brendon, how much of the onus is kind of on Devin Booker at this point to be it? I don't know if it just, does he just have to go supernova for this team to be at the level that it was at previously with Chris Paul in there to kind of make up for his absence? Is he going to be, viewed as more of a playmaker in this regard? Or is it one where the entire team is just going to have to collectively come together to make up for the absence of Chris Paul?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I don't know if the team necessarily has a great idea of what its identity is going to be during this time. I mean, again, it's one thing to be missing somebody who is one of your best players, if not your best player. But we all know, and from covering him as well, Jackson, that teams tend to, I guess maybe not so much the Rockets, but they take the shape of what it is that he does best. And so when you lose him, you don't just lose a part of your team, you kind of lose the fulcrum of it. And so I think the interesting thing we've seen already is that they are starting Devin Booker at point guard, at least right now, while Cameron Payne is still on the mend. So he has been that facilitator. But even apart from that, they've allowed guys like Jay Crowder, Cameron Johnson to handle the ball, run pick and rolls, very, very out of the ordinary. And aside from the Suns, we have not seen Jay Crowder be a ball handler. Like, it has been very weird. So I think ideally Booker takes on a little bit more of that. He is a good passer. He doesn't always get to show that. I don't think he's quite at the level of, a starting NBA caliber, like championship caliber point guard, like he's not John Moran or Luka Doncic out there, but he can get that job done. And I think ideally you probably have him doing it a little less than he is right now, a little more than he was before the injury. Cameron Payne can steady that. Aaron Holiday, who they just traded for, can be a part of that equation as well. It's going to be egalitarian. It's going to be a little bit of everybody having to step up. I think they can tread water, and obviously Book has to be a huge part of that. On Sunday, 37-7 on 50% shooting. He's playing like an all-NBA player in Paul's absence. It's kind of just figuring out how everything's going to fit together more than anything.
Shout out to Sean Coleman of Locked On Grizzlies. As you mentioned, John Morant in the same breath of championship level point guard. I'm sure he'll get a kick out of that. And some brownie points earned, by you with Memphis fans everywhere. But as well as, Dallas Mavericks fans with the Luka Doncic mention as well. Look at you covering all your bases, Brendon.
Got to make everybody happy.
Right? You just play all 29 sides. That way everybody's happy except for
who did I
fans.
miss? Who did I not say? That's the bigger question. I don't want anybody coming after me.
Right. No, so I mentioned this early on, and it does feel like, as dominant as the Suns have looked in this regular season, just completely waxing teams left and right. Yes, there's the question mark surrounding what happens, what shape this team takes without Chris Paul, but they've been the most dominant team in the NBA this season. But it doesn't feel like they're getting necessarily the respect that they deserve as potential championship favorites, or the favorite to come out of the Western Conference even. Why do you think that is?
It's a tough question. I think I think the answer that I've kind of settled on that makes the most sense to me, and that's mostly from other people telling it to me, because as you know, when you cover a local team, it's sometimes hard. It's like, well, I talk about them every day. I don't think they're getting underrepresented, but of course, nationally, you're totally right. They are. And I think a plausible explanation is that I think they just got too good too fast. I don't think we had those moments where we came to know them in a national spotlight type of way. They took their lumps and improved and grew, and then, came back hungrier the next year and got a profile written up of them in ESPN and go do like it wasn't like that. It was just all of a sudden, wait, who's Mikal Bridges? And he's in the finals. I mean, he's not a great example. He won 2 titles at Villanova, but who's Cameron Johnson? Who's Cameron Payne? Like, where do these guys come from? And I don't know who they are. I don't know their game. I don't know their story. And so I think it's this weird thing where they are in the early years of kind of being characters in the NBA for everyday fans, but at the same time are already in the thick of a title race for the second straight year. So I think it will come. I think you're already seeing it come. The big checkpoint to me is, do they get more respect in the awards voting this year? Devin Booker did not make All NBA last year. Mikal Bridges did not make All Defense. Monty Williams finished second in Coach of the Year when that award very clearly, in my opinion, should have been his. So if you see that stuff come around, I think it'll start to be a good sign. But honestly, Suns fans, I think, are mostly just thrilled to have such an awesome team. Like, everybody has a chip on their shoulder when they're bad, because you want to hear about ignored. You get ignored when you're awful. It's like any attention is good. The team is great. I think Suns fans are okay with it, but it's reasonable. It's like they don't get talked about as being famous, but they also don't get talked about as being like a great team. And I think those things are connected. So that second part needs to come along for sure, because they are for sure the favorites if they're healthy, in my opinion.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this season concludes with the absence of Chris Paul and what this Suns team looks like rolling into the playoffs. And you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Suns. Brendon, appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks, Jackson.